found this a foundational statement about what is going on in India. High growth achieved through private enterprise has not been translated into satisfactory progress on the social front, suggesting failure of governance. This is it. It is a very insightful statement. Tell me, what are all the insightful things just this statement says? How is growth achieved?
Private enterprise.
Exactly. Growth is achieved not through government, but wherever government did not play a role. If there are fast lanes and super highways, why? Because government didn't do them. It was private players. So all growth came through private enterprise. But what does he say? Is he talking about the first step or second step in this, in our discussion on inclusive growth? High growth achieved through private enterprise has not been translated into satisfactory progress on first step or second step? Second step, social front. Suggesting failure of governance. How is this related to governance? Because it is bureaucracy that is supposed to do. So he says this is the crux of the problem. This is the reason why the growth has been exclusive. So bureaucracy is responsible. That is his argument. Because private enterprise has generated a lot of money. All these are relevant from 1990s onwards. And this is what present state of India is. High growth, so more money is coming, but it is not put to the right use. Then why I like this book is that just look at this figure. Look at this. This is a shocking figure. Government of India transfers close to 8.5 lakh crores every year. You should remember all these figures. Close to 8.5 lakh crore. Remember, the book gave so many figures, but I chose some which you can use at crucial places. 8.5 lakh crore. 6 from FC, Finance Commission, and the rest from ministers every year. Okay. 8 lakh crores. And you know, there are 6 crore poor households. So per a household, suppose if you transfer 6 lakh crores, so per a household, how much can reach in 1 year? Can you tell me?
1 lakh.
Exactly. One lakh. Out of 8.5 lakh crore, if you think of 6 lakhs and 6 crore poor households, 1 lakh per year is a huge amount. So he's thinking of the poorest and then saying technically they should be able to get 1 lakh. To me, it shows that actually India is making money, and not only India is making money, the money is going to the government also. I mean, more may have to go, that's a different issue, but this figure itself is revealing. Because 1 lakh per each household is not a small amount. 9,000, around 8 to 9,000 per month.
So what is this 8.5 lakh crore figure exactly?
What is that?
So what figure is it exactly? Like what part of the budget is it? Expenditure?
What is this 8.5 lakh crores?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. What is this 8.5 lakh crores? Thank you. Please ask me as many questions as possible. This is how it functions. The state has its own income. State has its own income. And state gives to its people. This 8.5 lakh crore is not about the state. It is about what the government of India is giving to the state. How does government of India give? It gives through one finance commission recommendations. Finance commission recommendation has a formula. So tax are shared and it goes directly. He says 6 lakhs go from that, 6 LC. And 2.5 goes from ministries. Do you know how ministries give money? For example, health department. Health department launches a scheme. For example, we discussed Clean India. Clean India will allocate some money. Clean India will mean I'll give you 50% and you give 50%. So on a 50-50 basis, government of India is giving, and the state will have to give 50. Then they will get the total money. If the state doesn't give its 50, center will not give its 50. But then in this case, author is not talking about what is happening to each state. He's saying that on the whole, this much money is being transferred. So on the whole, each household should get, each poor household can get 1 lakh. And remember those figures. How many households are there in India? 24. And what is the poverty rate? 22. And then he calculated. In fact, he gave a different way of calculation. I found this 1 lakh figure is more interesting. So I changed the sentence. 1 lakh per year is the amount of transfer that is possible, given what is going on. So Mayank, is it clear to you now?
So it is clear, but sir, isn't this money used by states as part of their budget? Like they have their own obligations, expenditure obligations.
No. Of course. But what is all this expenditure for?
So it could be, depending on the state, it could be for infrastructure or...
No. What was that expenditure? What was everything for?
So
you are right.
Yes.
Exactly. You are right. But anyway, we are not considering state income. Okay. And the ministries give on developmental and current and capital account. Okay, this is not for salaries of the state government employees, not mostly, no. So this is usable. Okay. Of course. I mean, you can ask what is the, I mean, it's not only for them. That is why we considered 6 lakh crores. Out of 8.5, 6 is reasonable. And then there is a state income. Okay, next. So this is about it. Where are we? This is going by what we are getting now. But then the author says tax GDP ratio is on the lower side in India. Okay, growth. Oh, tax GDP ratio. Go through this. Tax to GDP ratio in India is 17%. Compared to 32% in India, 34% in Brazil. And the total expenditure, plan, non-plan, center states included 3% of GDP on education and 1.2% on health, against the global norms of 6% and 3%. So he is saying tax GDP ratio is much less. So because of which percentage of GDP spent on health and education is much less. Against the global norm of 3%, only 1.2%. Against the global norm of 6%, only 3%. He is putting all plan, non-plan, center states all included. It is a total picture. So it means there is more scope to increase the tax income. How? Even the last point you can consider, that is, make more people earn and let them enter the tax bracket. So it is less collected, even that is not spent enough, spent properly. And so, for example, take educational outcomes. You have schools, highly paid teachers, but educational outcome is like this. Percentage of class 5 children who can read class 2 level text is 44%. Class 8 children who can do simple division are only 44%. So there are many such figures like that on quality of education. And then you know about quality of healthcare. It's in a very, very bad shape. So if poor people get sick, that can have catastrophic consequences to their poverty and their income. Okay, so he's saying on a global scale, tax GDP ratio is much less. Okay. So tell me, is this clear? Okay. Okay, I'll come to this. And then he's saying that now he focuses on what is the nature of Indian bureaucracy. Okay, he says that bureaucracy is failing in collecting more, in bringing about reforms, or spending wisely. Okay, then he focuses on what is the nature of bureaucracy. And what I liked in this book is that it's always compared and across nations, giving large scale picture. And then he says, I mean, these are really quite interesting. The number of officers in India or the number of government staff is much lower compared to 1,000 population. The number of officers or the government staff, number of public employees is much lower. Okay. But their salaries compared to per capita income is much higher. And the flexibility in using them is again much lower. So can you tell me all these 3 points put together, who is a public servant in India compared to other countries? Number low, salary high, and very rigid in change. Instead of thinking of more number of points, I want you to imagine what is meant by a government employee in India compared to other countries. He gives Sri Lanka, Brazil, and whatnot. Vishal, you are saying?
Sir, I
underutilized.
Yes.
He is underutilized. That's true. Why? Because you think, okay, he's paid highly and so he is underutilized. But can he be utilized, and why is he underutilized? Rohita.
So I don't think government people will get more salaries. Like if you compare it to the private equivalents, they're much lesser.
Exactly. Thank you. People are comparing private sector in India versus government sector. But this man is comparing differently. Government sector in India versus government sector in other countries. And these are broader trends. I was shocked. Fewer people, but hugely paid. And not flexible. So all these 3 points put together, who is a government servant in India? That is my point. Bhaskar, what is your summary? All the 3 points put together. What is your summary, Bhaskar? Okay. Mayank.
There's just one thing to say about the salary bit. So I don't think even compare. So about the remuneration bit. So I don't think even compared to the Western nations, the government servants in India are paid too highly.
No.
Because the level of
This
income
is
is already
true of compared to Western nations also.
So, but their
I'll give you
median, so but the median income and their average income is already high. So even if they fall somewhere
But then
around
the
that,
people here are Indian bureaucrat is supposed to serve Indians only. And American bureaucrat is supposed to serve Americans. Isn't it so? Anyway, we can even compare it in terms of dollars. We can do that also. Per capita income is one measure. No, combining all three, what do you make of Indian bureaucrat? I would say it is just like the mindset of a person who is preparing for a competitive exam in India. Why do they take seriously? You have to, after all, study only once in lifetime. Isn't it? In a private sector, you are uncertain. If you don't work, they'll throw you out. Even if you are working hard but not useful, then they'll throw you out. But in government, it is access to privilege, permanency. If you are very highly ethical, moral, kind, and compassionate, you will work. But otherwise, you need not. And because the government doesn't get much from them, it doesn't hire more number of people. Because each one is a lot of liability also. Tell me, is my analysis right or wrong? So it's a very important position, and if you make it, then life is settled. So fewer people, privileged, and no punishment system. They need not learn. We knew these were the problems, but I didn't know. On an international scale, this is a problem. That is to say, in comparison to many countries, I didn't know that this is India's problem. Vishal, is my point clear?
Yes, sir. I'm able to draw parallels to private sector.
Exactly. What happens in private sector? People are not scared to lose, not so thrilled to get in, because they may lose and they'll have to work. Not only that they will have to work, but their work has to be relevant also. Otherwise, they won't exist. Tell me, which is a better system, private system or a government system? Why are you taking so much time to answer the question? Already vested interest. So, which is a better way to conduct business? Obviously private. If you don't have control over the people whom you have taken, why will you take more number of people in the first place? So this actually is the weakness of political power, weakness of democracy. Some people make it and they do things which are subversive to the total. It's like once you get in, you don't let others to get in. It is not that you are preventing, but you are contributing to a system where others don't get in. And tell me, as the world is changing, which will lose more between private and government? Government or private? As the world is changing, private sector which has flexible control over the employees and government that does not have. So which will lose?
Government.
Private or government? Huh?
Government, I think.
Government will lose. Because when the world is changing, you should be able to change the personnel. Retrain. Change number, change the qualifications, retrain, check them out. Isn't it? Wow, please.
One of the people I'm living here with, he works as an external consultant for the GST, implementing the GST system. So he was telling me that whenever some new IRS officer comes in, he wants to try new things, different things, and he wants to implement new systems within the framework. But then he gets transferred, and then another guy comes in and he's like, let's do whatever was happening before. Let's not change anything. Let's not upset anything. So that's why the changes happen much slower.
Things don't change.
Yeah.
Things don't change. Whereas in a private company, if they can't change, what happens to the private company? They'll just wind up. They'll have to close the shop and leave. Bhaskar?
So sorry that I couldn't reply. Had an issue with my mic. So
Okay.
just to sum up whatever Mayank and you were discussing, the point that I would like to ask is, if the author thinks the salaries in comparison with the West are a bit higher, I don't think salary should be a problem because, like Mayank just quoted an example, we do have ideas to implement in bureaucracy, but the problem is the incentive structures are not strong enough. So the real question that we should be asking is, how do we change this incentive structures? Because bureaucracy is often treated as a very thankless job. So that should be the main direction in which we should be going, rather than saying that, do we need bureaucracy? Privatization should happen, but existing workforce is not enough as per a lot of studies. So how do we create this incentive structures is the direction in which our conversation should be going, rather than questioning the very existence. That is what I believe.
No, number one, we are not questioning the very existence of bureaucracy. We are discussing how Indian bureaucracy is different from bureaucracies elsewhere. Okay. Other countries have larger bureaucracies. That is the point. They have larger bureaucracy with less salary and more flexible. You get my point, Bhaskar?
Yes, sir.
They have larger, that is what surprised me, and lower salary and more flexible. So basically, what happened in a public sector? Why did public sector fail? Public sector failed because people are not working. So it has to be massive rehauling took place under privatization 1991 reforms. If public sector worked well, we need 1991 reforms. Of course, if public sector worked well, USSR won't have collapsed and many things would have happened. But then the reason why public sector failed seems to be also the reason why bureaucracy, which we cannot get rid of, is not working properly. We can't get rid of bureaucracy, health and education and many things. It is not like one steel manufacturing unit you can get rid of and leave it to the private forces. But the reasons because of which we failed there are also the reasons why bureaucracy is inefficient here. And that seems to be the nature of Indian state. So some people get in and they behave in such a way, they are subversive to the total function. They get the privileges, but at the expense of the total system. So we need more people. In fact, within India, poorly performing states are the states where there are fewer officers per thousand population. Better run states have more officers, more government servants. So this raises the question, it is not like better state is the one that least governs. It is not like that. Better state has more officers, more people because they have the resources. And that also seems to be true of other countries also. They have more government servants. Okay, Bhaskar, now tell me.
Yes, sir. I agree.
Vishal? Okay, Bhaskar. Fine. Vishal, you wanted to say something?
Sir, so when we are comparing with other countries, keeping in
The
view
first
of
difference,
our
Vishal,
diversity
thank
and
you.
our
First difference here is that,
situation,
just 1 second, Vishal.
how far is it
First
right?
difference. Please tell me.
Am I audible, sir?
You are audible. It is just that I thought you won't speak while I was speaking, but you completed. Fine. Please complete.
So I was saying since we are comparing with other countries,
Exactly.
keeping in view of our diversity and our needs of our people, how far is it right to compare on those parameters?
That's why we're taking rich people versus poor rich countries and also poor countries, nearby countries and far off countries. If you take Brazil, Russia, and USA, what more do you want? And South Africa. You are covering the entire picture. Our analysis so far was always within India. It was not international. It was not across countries. Because we were not doing across the countries, we were missing a bigger picture. We are not able to see what actually is the nature of Indian bureaucracy. So it appears to me that on summary that Indian bureaucracy was like that privileged public sector employment. And on a comparative scale, not in comparison to private sector within India. Internationally.
And also, and comparing with private, as in we are seeing private sector, so they have a business. So in comparison, so managing the country could also be looked as a form of business from the public sector.
Finally, you should have certain outcomes and you should deliver those outcomes.
And in private
in fact,
sector,
outcomes also compared across the nations. Look at growth versus human development. Our growth was very high, but human development is less. So something is going on here. Again, growth across countries and human development also across countries. It is comparative picture. And then another thing is that he makes comparisons not only across countries, he makes comparisons across states. Okay, and there is a similarity. Okay, now something like what the World Bank says. Now let us go through some of the things he said. Okay, look at World Bank 2003 report. Okay, definitely World Bank has global experience. It's not about India only. It says a given section officer, the lowest working level officer in the secretariat, can have from 5 to 10 assistants consisting of UDCs, LDCs, and POs. Many are being redundant through advances in IT, yet continue to draw their salaries. This excessive logistical tail often exists alongside significant shortages of staff with skills in IT, financial management, and policy analysis. In many states, there is also a dearth of staff in critical frontline positions such as primary school teachers, police, and rural health workers. Yet different cadre rules and the tradition of a job for life can make it very difficult to let go of staff or to transfer them from surplus areas into where there is more demand. So it was saying there are many people, but not properly placed. At some places, not enough. At some places, excessive and outdated. Because there was no flexibility, there was no restructuring. Why? Because of job for life. So rigid policies, exit policies made things very difficult. Okay, do you see, for example, private sector? Private sector always wanted a flexible exit policy. Why? Because we take them, and if we are not able to do our business well, and if we have to change our technology, we will send. You can insist on higher remunerative package, but give us that freedom. Why flexibility is important to manage the situation. Whereas what is happening in government? Lack of flexibility, loss of flexibility. So as it becomes more rigid, especially when there is a changing world like IT, then it becomes more inefficient. Okay, and now he gives these figures. Government jobs importance. Okay, now we'll go through these points. The total number of government staff, state, union, PSUs, local bodies included, is about 1.2% of the population. Global average is 3%. Sri Lanka 4.5%, China 2.8%, and the number went down. I'll add more countries. I'll see. The number went down from 2019 million to 2012, 17.6 million. So we need more number of government jobs going by global average. Okay. Because we are not able to have sufficient control over them, though we need, we are going for contractual labor. For example, CSS, centrally sponsored schemes, permitted states to go for contractual labor. They could now be 25% of regular state government employees. 25% is a huge number. But they are ill paid and not properly trained because there is no permanent interest in them. Why don't we make them permanent? Because once you make permanent, you are losing control. So when you think of incentive structures, it is not simply the ability to reward, there should be ability to punish. And without the ability to punish, the incentive structure is weak. Okay. And people don't think of ability to punish. They only think in terms of salaries and more rewards. Look at the salary. Average salary of a regular government staff as multiple of per capita income is highest in India compared to other countries. India 7.2 times, OECD 1.6, Asia on the whole is three times. India is much higher. OECD is 1.6, because of which maybe you can say per capita income was more there. But Asia is 3. Number of government servants per thousand population is 14.4 in Tamil Nadu, only 2.7 in Bihar, and global average is 30. So better performing states have more number of employees. TN is much better than Bihar, but less than global average. And coming to flexibility, go through this. Singapore had 67% C and D staff. C and D are the Group C, Group D staff in 1970, but by 2008 it was reduced to 20%. And Group A staff increased from 5 to 50%. So Singapore could easily shift the employment from one group to another group. In fact, we carried out many reforms in terms of public sector restructuring, privatization, and then sale and other things. But when coming to government employment, we are very, very rigid. So tell me, now is the bigger picture clear to you now? Do you think author has a point? What do you say, Bhaskar?
Yes, sir.
Yes or no?
I agree.
Yes, exactly. I felt we were always thinking in terms of government versus the private, but not looking at international picture. If you look at international picture, it seems clear that what has happened to bureaucracy is what we identified as something happened in public sector, industrial public sector. Few people, huge salaries, inflexible, and loss making. But because they were loss making, we could wind up, but we cannot wind up bureaucracy. So that's where we caught. We are caught. So author says, it is because of this, though we are able to generate so much of income, even with low tax GDP ratio, we were not doing well because we don't have proper delivery mechanisms. Otherwise, the money we are making is reasonably good. So, Bhaskar, to your point on incentive structure, I feel incentive should include punishment system. That is the problem in India.
Yes, I agree.
For example, government school teachers have very huge salaries. There cannot be more than that. But why doesn't it work? Because there is no punishment system. There cannot be an incentive, right incentive structure where there is a concept of job for life. What do you say, Bhaskar?
Absolutely, sir. I agree.
This is excessive security. Excessive security is the source of inefficiency.
But also at the same time, like I often say, bureaucracy is a very thankless job because the public perception, especially when everything is going right, we often don't see public appreciating the hard work that goes behind. Sometimes the perception in public is bureaucracy is rotten and things don't work. If that is the case, really, India wouldn't be here. At least whatever positive things we see today is because of good bureaucrats. They don't get to see the day of the light and public appreciation. So that also should probably change. Presidential awards and other stuff is just not enough.
But in the last 30 years, what is good thing about India? Is it bureaucracy or economic growth?
I don't see the existence of dichotomy. It's not either that or this. There are some isolated.
So do you mean to say bureaucracy improved from 90s? See, first of all, did India develop self-confidence and some global image from 90s onwards?
Yes, sir.
And what was the reason? Bureaucracy or private sector?
I think there are some bureaucrats also behind the private sector. For example, if you have
No, there may be, but what is it? We are looking at a bigger picture.
Private
We
sector.
found that when bureaucracy was removed from the task, India was doing well. That has been the experience. You know, this entire new image of India is only from 90s.
That's probably because of the old age bureaucrats, maybe. The newer generations have a different mindset from what we see in the olden times. That is what I strongly believe.
No, I don't know. I think you are looking at minor level. Don't think in terms of bureaucrats. Just look at larger picture. What is the source of India's pride? What is the source of India's confidence? It is not from bureaucracy. Okay. Next, let us see other things. So, okay, next. Okay, I'll tell you about center-state relations here. The author says, whatever is true of problems of India, there is a lot of variation across the states. Some states are doing better. On the whole, southern states do better, and northern states much worse. And within northern states, some states are worse. And he says that is because bureaucracy is not doing well. Why is bureaucracy not doing well? Same problems. First of all, few people, inflexible. And what happens is that, for example, take a Clean India program. You know, these programs work on percentage basis. You will get your 50% share of that program only when you contribute your 50%. And also, when you complete the program, money is released based on the performance. Not only the performance, it is reporting of that performance. The author says many times states are not able to do that. Poor states are not in a position to do that. And what is happening? Because poor states are not in a position to do that, the money for that ministry is going to other states, which means better states are getting more and poor states are getting less. Bureaucracy failure. Okay, so it means it is a what's called a vicious cycle. Because you are poor, you become poorer. Why poor? Same thing in terms of number of government employees, how rigid they are, what kind of control. If the political system is better, bureaucracy is better. This we discussed before. So he says some certain things need to be changed. Certain procedures have to be simplified. Monitoring systems have to be simplified. And then certain laws have to be changed. For example, there is one very serious law in Indian administration that whatever is allotted to you, you should spend it within that financial year. He says many times money comes late. And then even if you do, it may be difficult to do. It is not reported within that time. So he says in certain countries, 5-year term is given to spend. So he says some such reforms are needed. Okay. So he says certain schemes have to be evaluated, monitoring systems have to be evaluated. We have to pay attention to which state is doing poor, and then some rules have to be changed. Okay. Otherwise, poor states are becoming poorer and rich states are in a position to make use of those grants. And also, what is true of the states, it's also true of certain ministries. Some ministries are in a position to better use, and some ministries are not in a position to better use. For example, tribal administration, it is more difficult to make use of it. Education. So, these are the problems across the ministries and across the states, and reforms are needed. These are more specific. Vishal, you wanted to ask something?
Sir, yes. So again, drawing parallels to private, we are talking about the failure of bureaucracy here. So when we look
Exactly.
at in a private company, we have the CXO level leaders who are the chief executive and level. Then we have a managerial level, and then we have the lower rung who implement things. So if we see in public sector, similarly, we can say bureaucrat are the third level. Then we can have the cabinet at the top or the PM at the top. Then the other ministers second. But in private, the failure is not attributed to the people who are implementing. It is majorly attributed to people who manage or at the CXO level. Even if we look at very successful companies, we only will know about the chief executive officer or who are on the top leadership for the success of the companies. Even for failures.
What is the point you are making, Vishal?
I'm saying, shouldn't the ministers and all be more responsible for these failures than?
Of course, you are right. Of course, but that is the first thing we discussed, right, in previous classes. Failure of bureaucracy is failure of politicians. We discussed how the political sector deteriorated and because of which bureaucracy deteriorated. That is one we discussed.
We are just going to a level more deeper.
Exactly. We're just looking at the details. Of course, political sector is the main thing. Political sector is deteriorating. It's not worried about it. Okay. Rohita? So just 1 second. Coming to public and private, I would say the main difference is private can fail, and so they fear. Entire organization can fail, individuals can fail, so they take care. But in government, it is not like that. There is nothing like failure. I mean, there is no punishment system. So that is why we should make it as flexible as possible. It calls for innovation. We should understand what makes private sector more successful. And how do we bring such things here? Bringing meant not only positive incentives, but also negative ones.
There are even budgets for hiring people.
Exactly. There should be more flexible management. That is why governments are going for contractual labor and things like that. But why do they have to go for contractual labor? Because of lack of control over the permanent. The problem with contractual labor is that they're not properly trained. They don't have enough incentive, enough motivation. And then they soon ask for regularization. Yes. So it's just like pampered section versus insecure and unregulated and ill-paid. This gap should be reduced.
As you rightly pointed out, again, after some years of contractual, they ask for regularization.
Exactly.
Mainly, I think it has to do with the mindset of people who perceive the government.
So if the bureaucracy is doing well, we need more. We are employing fewer people compared to other countries. We need more. But because we are not doing, we are scared to employ them. Rohita.
Sir, I have two things to say. First one, why is there this lapsability of fund, like 1 year, after 1 year it should lapse. Why is that principle there?
Because of the political system. I mean, it needs to be changed. The political system is it is a 5-year plan to annual plan to annual budget through that Article 112 annual financial statement, and the legislature controls. So it came from political system. It can be changed.
So there is nothing to. It has nothing
financial
to do.
Statement.
It has nothing to do with corruption, like something like that.
No, not like that.
Okay.
Everything goes on annual basis.
Sure, sir.
So the parliament releases funds on annual basis.
Okay, sir. And one more thing, sir. I think to curb the power, I mean, the excess power in the staff, government staff, deputation is also used, sir. Like, transfer is the biggest weapon they use always to curb the power.
That's true. But transfer is only minimum power. He is not, other privileges are not reduced, whether his salary or later promotional chances, pension. These are not. The fact that the transfer is the biggest threat shows how less controlled the bureaucrats are. How can transfer be a power? Transfer became a power because other powers are not available. There should be a way to reduce the salary or to punish or to suspend. There should be mechanisms. Okay. Now he makes one point about politicians. This is again one interesting. Okay, go through this about legislature. These are shocking details to me. Between 2009 and 2014, Haryana legislature had sessions for 11 days a year. And UP, Gujarat, Punjab, Uttarakhand sat for 22, 31, 19 and 19 days respectively. Means MLAs are sitting only for 11 days a year. Of course, some MLAs may be absent during those days. So, what does this mean? We discussed this point before. What does this mean? This basically means that legislatures are not functioning. Why are they not functioning? Because executive decides. It is centralization of power. Executive decides. And MLAs are not interested in legislation. And as we discussed, MLAs are not interested in legislation. What are they interested in? They are interested in things like transfer, promotion, and then all kinds of things. So, the constitutional scheme is not working as it's supposed to work. So politicians are busy interfering with administration because they're not interested in legislation. So because of which the entire bureaucracy is controlled at various levels by MLAs and MPs. So because of which superiors do not have control. If MLA can control a MRO, why will MRO fear collector? You won't. So as he said in the earlier chapters, politicians were not interfering. So bureaucrats had higher level bureaucrat could tell the lower level, so I am with you. He has control. But now those controls were gone. But why did they go like this? As the author explained, on the whole, political sector changed. How did the political sector change? Democracy, criminalization, all kinds of things. It is a different quality of politicians entered, and they don't go by those old rules, and they cannot go by also. So administration changed. So those numbers about for how many days a legislative session is sitting shows that the constitutional scheme as it was supposed to work is not working. So in a way it is inappropriate. we discussed how to make it appropriate. Massive decentralization. But the problem with massive decentralization is again, it is empowering the politicians and how they behave is an issue. Okay, Mayank, please.
So can we
Just
also
one second. Just 1 second. Let me complete. Coming to why we have this structure, for example, we had a prime minister, we have prime minister, chief minister, and then suddenly we have DM, district magistrate, collector. There is no politician at district level. Why did we go for this? We went for this because we felt at that time, that was their thing, that was thinking at that time. We have not really matured as democracy. So bureaucrats have to take care. Okay. But then did we mature or did we become worse off? Is a different question. But when they thought that empowering the politician is not a good thing, because Indian society is extremely primitive, caste-wise, religion-wise, language-wise. It is extremely divided. Objectivity may not be possible. So bureaucracy was interested, and because political sector was not developed enough. But what happened afterwards? Political sector developed in its own ways and disrupting, doing all kinds of things. He is not given enough formal power, and so he is using informally various systems which are not legal. So I don't know if I made my point clear. Is my point clear, Bhaskar?
Yes, sir.
Arvind, is my point clear?
Yes, sir.
So DM was powerful, bureaucracy was powerful because at one time that was their thinking. They didn't think that the politicians or democracy would go in this direction. Okay. Okay. Mayank.
Yes, I was just saying that can we also link this with the anti-defection law, which has diminished the role of an
What?
The anti-defection law, 10th schedule.
Yeah, anti-defection law contributed to increasing the power of the executive. No doubt.
Yes.
Anti-defection law contributed. But if there was no anti-defection law, legislators were only misusing that power to shift to other parties. They were taking money and changing the governments. That was the reason why anti-defection law was brought. So on the whole, there is an issue of quality of political sector, and the quality of political sector has to do with the quality of people's consciousness. Okay, Bhaskar, because you are discussing global issues also. Okay, and you are also thinking on the whole what is happening to the world. What I see on the whole to the world is that at one time there was elitism. Okay, the elite had certain views and they ruled in a particular way, and they didn't make those assumptions very explicit. They had their theories. People did not actually take part. But as democracy advanced, people were taking part. When people were taking part, their prejudices were coming to the fore. This is how I would explain the rise of right and things like this. It is empowerment of the people, but when people were ill-informed, it is their prejudices that would come forward. So people are getting empowered at a faster pace than they are educated or they are wise.
So can you clarify what does this mean?
One of the things that contributed to this faster pace is information technology.
So I didn't get
See,
the
how
point.
many people take part in politics now? How many people discuss? How many people know? So many people know. But earlier, this much knowledge was not there. So all kinds of primitive things are coming into the system. mean, this is one way of looking at it, but there are other ways also. Okay, Bhaskar, you had something to ask.
So you said that people are getting empowered faster than they are getting educated. Can you please clarify on that?
Exactly.
I didn't get the statement.
Okay, take for example Trump versus Obama. Okay, Obama said that Islam is not is peaceful. Okay, why did it say? I mean, he didn't call it Islamic terrorism. Why? It is not because Obama did not know about Islam, but he thought it would be unwise to say entire Islam is terrorist. Okay. That is how elite behaved. Obama is an example. That's how Nehru behaved. That's how many people in India also behaved. They didn't tell the full truth to the people. Please follow. But what is people's perception? No, terrorism has something related to Islam. So when Trump came and said, this is Islamic terrorism, you don't have the courage even to name it, people felt connected because that's the truth. So Trump could have did all kinds of things which were so naive, but then there were many things where people felt, yes, he was speaking the truth. So elite held views to itself. They did not educate, or the education of the masses was not enough. But then they were empowered. They knew more things, and elite was not in a position to respond because in the first place they gave the partial truth, and now another partial truth from the other side is coming, and that seems to be more vicious. I said too many things in this. I don't know if I'm clear. At least you can ask me questions. Bhaskar?
I still didn't get the point. How are they getting empowered faster than they're getting educated?
How are they getting empowered faster? Because they're able to know, they're able to exercise their vote, they know more information, they are demanding, they're more conscious of their rights, they think that they can decide. More people know newspapers, more people can criticize chief minister, they don't think too highly of chief minister, prime minister, or anybody for that matter. This is all empowerment. But this is not wisdom. This is not, it is like that. So they think their views matter and they know. They think that they know what happened during the partition in Indian case, what Muslims are, like that. I mean, doesn't make sense to you, Bhaskar?
I'm still trying to connect the dots.
Okay, you can think about it. Basically, people think they know and they do know, so they don't leave the decisions to the elite. I mean, I don't see difference between Trump and what is going on in India. It is about people thinking that they know. Okay. In fact, people think that we have been cheated all along. The Indians feel that they have been cheated of right knowledge of history. Okay. And that is why Hindutva is popular. They think that they didn't actually learn what actually happened through history books. So now somebody is saying something different. I mean, is this not the feeling you get, Bhaskar?
Partially, yes. But having said that, isn't it definitely better than believing that some elitist class would be better ruling us than what?
That is a different issue. We will look into that. We'll look into that. That's fine. We're not judging.
So this discussion probably has gotten more democratic participation. I'm not talking about the quality of democracy, but more participation in terms
That's
of
fine.
numbers.
There's no doubt. More participation, more democracy. But these are the evils that Plato also talked about. It is ill-informed. Ill-informed people decide on important issues. It is like that. So, what do we do? not to contain information, but bring wisdom, bring education. It's like that only, nothing more. That's why it's mostly information technology related. So okay, let us come back to this topic. So what is happening to the political sector? Politicians are in competition to win votes. And the people are demanding things. So politicians making all kinds of promises, trying to win, and people have partial knowledge. They don't think in terms of long-term interests. So they do this. So democracy spread, and the change in the quality of the politicians all affected bureaucracy also. I mean, these are all interrelated processes. The old arrangement where the people believed the leader and the leader had an elitist view, and then he would tell the bureaucrat, do like this, and he would do. These are gone. It is a chaotic. So even if the politician knows the truth and secularism is good, he can't really confront the other person. So even if the person knows that agricultural reforms are needed, he can't confront another politician who is insisting on things like short-term things. Let's think about it. This is how democracy is changing, has changed so much. Okay. And change of democracy led to change of political system, and change of political system is playing havoc with bureaucracy. Okay. But coming to why we had something like this, it is because we didn't trust the democracy, we didn't trust the politicians. We just felt okay. For example, I'll tell you, Jayaprakash Narayan used to criticize, Loknayak Jayaprakash Narayan used to criticize Nehru. You should generate opposition, and you should positively build opposition. Nehru replied, do you know, the actual opposition is not in parliament. The actual opposition is Indian society. Very reactive forces are there in Indian society. That is the opposition. We have to know how to handle it. And he's right. It is those reactive forces that come to the fore through democratization. Those are the people who had long-term interest and they behaved in particular ways. They didn't mobilize everybody. So it is just India's reactive caste and religion and division all coming out to the fore. And politicians are responding. Where is bureaucracy in this? So, why we followed colonial thing? Because we didn't really trust society and the politicians. So we followed one neat model, but now it's turned upside down because it is mass politicization. So either way, you have to confront to educate or escape. You just can't escape. It's just like, too many things. People know. In every area, take for example pornography. Everybody can see or can watch pornography. Look at how inaccessible it was at one time. Pornography is an example. Anybody can watch at any time. But is the society up to such an exposure and knowledge to everybody? It is not up to it. We don't have control systems. So I would say the main problem with the age itself is knowledge at a much faster pace compared to wisdom or power compared to knowledge, whatever. There is a gap. There is no harmony. Okay. But the way to confront is to move forward. You can't control anybody now. So you should only choose to educate. And I believe one way of right kind of education, which also IT enables, is cross-national comparisons. How are others? What are we? Okay. Okay. Just take these questions. Okay. Just let me see how you answer these questions. Okay, this is one question you attempted. Now I am giving series of questions. Take this.